Welcome to MGAA Conversations, our new podcast channel where we'll be discussing with an exciting number of guests all things related and topical within the ever-growing MGA community. Welcome to the latest edition of MGAA Conversations. I'm Mike Keating, and today I'm delighted to welcome Richard Garry, Chief Commercial Officer at Gamma Risk. Richard, very good morning to you.
Hi, Mike. Great to be here.
Yeah, great. Fantastic. Looking forward to another exciting and rich conversation. So let's get straight into it. So, Richard, I'd imagine our listeners aren't quite aware in terms of what Gamma Risk do. So please, let's, as a start off, give us some history, some background and who you work with, and share with our listeners exactly what's the beauty of Gamma.
Perfect. Yeah. So I'll give you the party line first. So Gamma is a location intelligence solutions provider that integrates software, data, and services to help our clients reduce risk through better decision making. So we harness AI, data science, spatial analytics to build solutions to geographical questions. Look, I always think that's a little bit of a mouthful. So a simpler version that
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, a simpler version is that we effectively provide data, so around flood, subsidence, windstorm, crime through APIs and through our map visualization platform called Peril Finder. So I think people are more familiar with that kind of wording than the previous set. So
Yeah.
Peril Finder allows the user to access the data they need to support decision making accurately and quickly. And they're sort of key words that we would look at: accuracy and then speed of access to data. We primarily work on the property side, so home and commercial. And what Gamma uses is sort of accurate geocoding to identify the location. We put in an address or a postcode, identify exactly where it is, the property, use the building footprint to identify the extent of the property, and then you overlay the flood or subsidence or whatever peril it is. So we've been working over the past few years then to augment that peril spatial data, and we've developed a product called AddressLink, which is our building level data repository. So what we do is we take in data from outside, we curate, validate it, we model gaps, and then we store all of that within AddressLink and make it available to our clients. And that's really valuable for understanding the risk for pricing and then also the onboarding side of things as well. So it certainly speeds all of that up. I just give you a little bit of background. I mean, I've jumped into what we do.
Yeah, no, it'd be useful.
We've been around for almost 30 years, Mike. So we're not quite a startup. We're based in Dublin in Ireland. People might have copped onto that with my accent, but we work with a lot of the bigger companies here. So everyone from A to Z, as one of my colleagues likes to say. So a lot of the A's, AXA, Aviva, Allianz, AIG, and all the way to Zurich, and a lot in between. So what we've done over the past maybe 5 or 6 years is we moved our Peril Finder platform to become cloud native, which allowed us then to move into other countries a lot easier. So we looked at the UK initially, and we moved across there a few years ago. So we have a number of MGAs now as clients, but always looking to expand and grow.
So just to replay that, Richard. So and I could clearly show my age, but obviously postcode rating, etc., is an integral part if you're looking at commercial and home, certainly with, as you quite rightly talk around, weather and flood and water runoff, etc. So in a way, what you're sort of sharing is that, there's obviously been models which have been available for a period of time, but you've actually invested as an organisation to get yourself to that sort of platinum sort of standard where really both the risk selection and forensic pricing is now at a level, which probably wasn't around for some period of time, which therefore gives insurers and MGAs that predictability in terms of reducing aggregation in terms of where they are and that sort of necessary in terms of driving underwriting profit. Would that be fair?
Yeah, that's a good summary of it. All right. We try to go beyond the postcode as well, so right down to the individual property. I mean, postcode is fine. to a certain extent. If there's no risk in the postcode, it's fine. But if there is a risk to one of the properties, what do you do then? So what we want to do is
yeah,
get right down to the individual property, and then even better than that, use the property extents, that building footprint. So you can see, is there any part of the property, if it's a large building, if it's commercial, that might be exposed to, and flood is always your starting point, but it could be subsidence or any
yeah.
other environmental risks. And then the address link piece really adds a huge amount of value, because then you can start looking at the age of the property, or how it's built, or how big it is. A lot of very really valuable data there as well.
And you can, just before I move on sort of to our next theme, do you get or have any ability through your client base to sort of do a 360 and say, like, through your platform and your tool, that that's reduced this amount of exposure, that potential claims, it's mitigated to that? Do they sort of feedback that to you in terms of, because what you're in a prevention way, in a way, so you may not get that, but do you get any of that sort of pat on the back and say, that from that perspective?
I think the pat on the back is the renewals when it comes up, that they keep
Okay,
working
fair
with
enough.
us. No, we they don't they don't tend to share that data. I mean, I think there would be great value if it could be shared, because you could do a lot
Yeah,
more with it, and loop that back into an organization, or even in aggregate if certain organizations could work together. But no, we don't tend to get
yeah,
it. But we know that just our own way of analyzing it, that there is value in accuracy and in adding more valuable data to the APIs that we provide into our clients.
yeah, yeah. So moving on, so and staying on the theme around technology, there's clearly a lot of market chat around technology in the wider world, and obviously in our financial services insurance sector, and how transformation it can be. Clearly, there's an element of what is real and what are myths, in terms of what can be done. I'd be really interested. I'm sure our listeners are. What's your sense if you step out of that tech, technological lane, which obviously Gamma Risk are in, and look at that environment? Are you positive? Do you think what's coming down the track? What's your sentiments on it as an outsider, perhaps, if you can step out of it?
Yeah. Um, Look, there, as you say, there is constant chat about new tech, whether that's AI, which is the hot topic at the moment, um, or other things that are out there, and they're always going to be the game changer. Um, and sometimes there's so many of these bright, sort of sparkly things that to get excited about, that it can be distracting to the day-to-day business. Now, I suppose, saying that, we always view it as technology is just an enabler for the data that allows someone to make a decision, and it's really the
Okay.
data that's the most important thing. Um, and providing that quality data through APIs. I mean, it's happening already. A lot of people have that, or have the ability to consume it. But I think in our line of business, which is providing that data through technology to support decision making, it's really the data that's the most important thing. To, I suppose, to quickly and easily access the data. So if technology can help with that, that's always positive. Um, but it needs to be consistent and reliable, so that the user can actually trust what they're seeing. So, like, what's the source of the data ultimately? Is it generated through some sort of black box that I can't really see? Um, but improving that data availability is important. Look at a good example is the Ordnance Survey recently. They've made a huge amount of building level property data available. So things like building use, age, construction material, the presence of basements, which is really, really topical, um, and building type. So it's a good quality, reliable data source, um, which obviously we can make available through our platform. So that's certainly one thing that we would look at. While the tech is great, it's more like what's under the hood. I'm always like to
Yeah,
I always
yeah,
like to have a look at that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's an interesting analogy, and just just on, you mentioned around, and obviously it's critical, the importance of data, and that's hygiene factors now in all insurers, MGAs, in terms of that bit. What's your sense around the creation of new data? So a good example on the audience survey. Do you feel organisations such as yourself and your peers are actually sort of waiting on the doorstep for other organisations to produce greater sort of data sets which you can then use for the benefit which you've already described? Or is there an industry which is, constantly investing in creating more data sets? What's your view on that?
We do both. So we would work with a lot of the blue chip providers of data, the Ordnance Surveys, your JBAs or ambientals, those that have
Yeah,
been around for a while. But we're always looking at other sources of data as well. But they have to be tested, which we would do, and we would do a lot of that testing ourselves. Um, and also sometimes there's gaps in data available from whoever it is, and that's where we can come in and model and fill those gaps. But we're very transparent. Anything we ever do, we don't say, "Oh, here's the data, and that's all you're getting to see." We'll tell our clients how it's made, and let them
right.
test it thoroughly. So there isn't any, I suppose, question marks over what they're actually getting and the reliability of it.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. So in a way that both you're doing a bit of it, others are doing a bit of it. So I suppose that what I'm trying to get to, the community is working, is aligned in terms of trying to get data which is going to help customers get insurance and be more forensic in terms of how their risks are priced, because that's ultimately where certainly the underwriting community want to get to, in terms of to be as forensically pricing individual risk with the right data which is supportive of that risk.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, one area that is probably worth talking about as well is around climate change. It's, I mean, we've been talking about climate change for a long time, but there's certainly in terms of, say, flood risk, there's a view that we use the current models that we have and that they're fine and they're fit for purpose, which they are. They're very good and they've worked to date. But I think there's a lot of change going on at the moment. So we've had a very wet, basically from June to June. It
Yeah,
just never seemed to stop raining. And
yeah,
that's like climate change, how it's going to affect these islands here is uh, sort of more extreme winter storms combined with stronger winds and heavier rainfall. So we sort of seen that over the last while. So the last storm season, which basically goes from around sort of September to March in 2023, there was 10 named storms. Now there was only two the previous storm season. Now that does vary a little bit, but if that was to continue, I think we need to start maybe looking at the models a little bit differently. So
yeah.
there are
Good
climate
point.
change
Yeah,
models there that will say, okay, this is your current risk profile at the moment for flood risk, but what will happen under different scenarios and different time horizons into the future? And like the banks are already taking this into account because they've got a longer term view of risk in terms of mortgages. But I think the insurance sector might need to start having a look at this as well, just to see is the future here now already, or to a
yeah,
certain extent,
yeah,
and should we look at it? I mean, some of the insurers use this data to report to regulators at a sort of an aggregate level, but I think in the
yeah.
underwriting space, it might be worth having a look at some of this data.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. When you're predicting maybe sort of your ULRs sort of 3 years out, and what's your large loss consumption, which would normally actually sit around, your weather events, then normally you would base that on your history as opposed what may be going sort of the future. So I think that's a very good point.
Yeah,
So you've mentioned the word, not me. So regulation. Okay, so quite rightly with the uh, the advancement of technology, you're looking at AI, which you've already touched upon. There was, I think 18 months ago, there was a paper around sort of facial recognition in terms of how that could all be used around pricing sort of insurance. What from through, gamma risks lens, what do you feel the regulator is doing well and correctly, and where do you feel, if at this moment in time, that the regulator is perhaps intervening unnecessary?
Yeah, I suppose, look, there's always concerns about regulators maybe being too involved or potentially limiting growth or stifling progress. Um, I suppose my view would be that if we didn't have at least some rules and regulations, there'd be carnage out there. Um, so as
Very
a,
true.
I mean, as a small technology company, we're really flexible and we can adapt to new tech and new developments, and we can then integrate those really quickly into our solutions. But we always have to be mindful, I suppose, of a few things. I mean, there's the potential moral issues with either the data or the tech.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
maybe personal information in terms of profiling or the overuse of AI. Um, and there's no point in Gamma integrating all of this into our solutions if they can't or won't be used by our clients, either because
yes,
of
yeah,
some internal rules or regulations or external regulatory restrictions, or even in some cases the the tech limitations of larger companies where
yeah,
they won't be able to use this new stuff if we move too fast. So we always have to be aware of these. Um, and I think actually, Mike, this is probably where like the likes of the MGAA and trade organizations can really help, is to bring these different views of members together and their opinions to represent the business and to put forward the
sure. Yeah,
those maybe unforeseen consequences of new rules.
yeah,
And look, we're
yeah,
always happy to be involved and play our part in that as well.
yeah, yeah. I think that's I think I think it's evolving. I think from a regulatory perspective, but I think there's clearly going to be a very close alignment in terms of how data becomes more and more rich. AI is introduced in terms of, as an enabler alongside underwriters, but ultimately, people will be priced, or risk selected and priced using even more data going forward than perhaps they are now. And I think the regulator quite rightly is saying we need to understand that, so there's no necessary selection against or prejudice in terms of how that data has been used. And I think that's, with your clients, which you've obviously referenced, they would be extremely mindful of that, because they're the ones being directly regulated, be it in by the CBI or be it by the FCA here in the UK.
Yeah, yeah,
So just move into talent, really. So obviously you've got a wide and diverse sort of uh, client base. You've got an organisation been together sort of 30 years. Again, just asking you the importance of data science, both in MGAs and in particular in terms of insurers, for all the reasons in terms of driving the right risk selection and pricing. What's your general feel around organisations such as Gamma Risk and again your peers' ability to attract new talent sort of into your industry, the tech industry, as opposed to sort of competing industries? Are you confident, or is there more to be done?
yeah. Look, we're a small tech company, and we rely obviously on the likes of your data scientists, developers, front end developers, climate change experts, even, and spatial GIS experts. So it can be hard to find the right staff, certainly at the right price. We're based in Dublin,
Yeah,
so we're competing with a lot of large tech firms that are based here. So Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Intel, you name any of the big guys, they seem to be here and have a big presence. Um, and actually, an area as well that we see a lot of competition is in the sort of gaming and financial technology sector. So, I mean, the likes of
right, yeah,
Paddy Powers are hoover up a
yeah,
lot
good
of good
point.
talent over here, and they're all after the same sort of staff that we have. So, and they offer higher salaries. So we certainly found it hard to compete, but once we tend to get them in the door, we tend to be able to keep them, I suppose, to a certain extent. And actually, in the past few years, even some staff that had left, we've rehired. So we've taken on about actually only in the past maybe 12 months, 3 or 4 staff who had left over the previous years and then have come back. Um, and I suppose we've been interested to figure out why that is. And the feedback seems to
Yeah,
be around. the grass isn't always greener. Um, is the first line, and then when you dig a little deeper, it's probably around what we do. So the great thing about spatial analytics is it's very visual, so you can see what you're doing on maps. Now, whether our clients always use the map interface or not, but with Peril Finder, you can actually go in and see the changes that you're making and see how it works. So everyone loves maps. Um, the other side of it is keeping, I suppose, allowing the staff to be quite sort of independent and flexible. Like the best people that we've got, we tend to leave them alone, get on with the job, and
Right.
then
Yeah.
we just have regular light touch catch ups rather than dictate you're doing X, Y, and Z this week, and we need to see it completed by the end of the week. Um, it's yeah, there's more flexibility, and also we do a lot of R&D, and R&D tends to keep everyone interested. So if you're researching
Yeah.
new projects or you're developing something else, there's less pressure on it usually, and it's more creative. So we tend to, so they're the sort of areas where we tend to be able to keep um, our key people happy. Is yeah, the flexibility, the independence that they have, and then working on new projects. So yeah, it's
Yeah. Because yeah, it's challenging though. Clearly, it's
oh no,
challenging.
look
So
at it is,
from
it
that
is
perspective,
to get good people.
yeah,
It it costs a fortune, but if you can
yeah,
keep them, then
yeah,
it's worthwhile. Yeah,
yeah. It is. I suppose the interesting now from a generation bit is now sort of job interviews. If I go back, I'll show my age. Is always used to be one way in a way where you were sort of presenting yourself, but now new generation, you're if you're an employer, a prospective you're being interviewed yourself by the
definitely.
candidate to see whether you fit for their match as opposed to whether they might not like you might want like them, but they might not like you from that perspective, which is sort of my view, sort of a generation thing. And I think the right thing actually. And I would have thought, as you've articulated, in that tech world where there is sort of high demand, and obviously there's a lot of university sort of degree students coming out and looking to go into that tech world, and I think your gaming and commission sort of that area again that sort of passed me by really how attractive that can be. It's something you've got to really work out hard. But I suppose if your retention level is good, then clearly it's great that Gamma can say, well, once you get them in the door, then because of your culture and how you operate, then they tend to stay, which is ideal.
Yeah, I mean that's what we try to do is make it an environment that they want to hang around in. I'm not talking about
Yeah,
hang around all day and stay here all night long, like playing video
yeah,
games and board games and things. But it's more that when they're here, they like to work, and we're flexible as well. I mean, the we have the office and work from home is quite flexible. We don't insist on everyone being in 9 to 5, um, which is obviously in this day and age, people like that flexibility.
yeah, yeah. I can see that. Yeah, very really interesting insight on that bit. So so just looking ahead a little bit, sort of you mentioned around the product, gamma risk plans for the next 12 to 15, 18 months. Is it continuing to refine the areas you've sort of articulated, or is there anything sort of new on the horizon you can share with our listeners?
Yeah, well, we just launched actually a new product in the UK. It's a little different to what we've just been talking about here. It's called EPC Wow. It's a home retrofit advice tool for the general public. So most people want to live in a warmer, less drafty house. They want to spend less,
Yeah,
certainly, will spend less on their energy bills, but they don't know where to start with it. So EPC Wow allows the homeowner to see what they can do to their homes to make them more energy efficient and warmer. So things like insulating the attic, the walls, changing the boiler, windows, doors, installing solar panels. So what it allows you to do is um, just interact with the tool, put in a little bit of information about your property, and it will then present a list of measures and how much it would cost. And then also links out to the likes of banks to finance it, or building contractors to actually carry out the work. Um, and then it tells you your return on investment. and how the changes can even increase your home value. So
Okay.
we launched it in Ireland a few years ago. Bank of Ireland, AXA, SSE use it here, and hopefully over the coming years we'll see that take off in the UK. So look at it, it's a great solution, I suppose, for companies to affect change on their customer base. So most customers along that EPC journey, what it can really do is help with your scope 3 emission targets. So scope 3 is
Sure. Yeah.
those results of activities and assets that aren't necessarily controlled by the organization. So your customers would fall into this grouping or this category. So if you were able to help more of your customers to move, say, along that EPC journey, even from, say, if you move from like a rating of a G to an A, you could save 8 to 10 tons. And if you spread that across a customer base, equivalent of like forests of trees every year would be saved. So that's really the EPC WOW. As I say, AXA are currently using it at the moment. So we'll see. Yeah, we'll see where that one goes. But it seems to be a lot of potential in it. A bit different to what we talked about earlier.
Yeah, I know. I've got a pretty drafty old house myself, actually, so I might circle back round with you on that one.
Yes, yeah, no, definitely.
see what and just as always, final question for us. Really interesting insight. So if we were sat again in 12, 15 months' time having this conversation, what would you like to be able to tell me sort of what Gamma Risk have achieved in that particular time? What would be your aspirations?
Yeah, probably a few things. One would be EPC WOW certainly taken off, and
Sure.
we'll see that on a number of websites over the next while. And actually, it mightn't even necessarily be in insurance, where I think there is certainly use for it there. Other sectors like lending and banks and utilities and anyone with a large customer-facing profile could use something like this. The other thing is possibly expanding PowerFinder as well beyond the UK and Ireland. So we're looking at other countries at this stage. Maybe Spain or Germany seem promising. Germany have a big flood issue at the moment, so there's a lot of interest in our type of offerings. And Spain is another angle as well that we're exploring. So they do have a solution consortio. It's similar to Flood Re. So flooding isn't a big concern, but like the likes of hail and wildfire are big issues in Spain. So that's another that has a spatial element to it as well. So those two, if we got those, and obviously growing our existing solution in the UK would be great.
Sure.
Any MGAs that are out there or insurers that are listening that are interested, certainly get in touch.
Okay, fantastic. Richard, fantastic. Many thanks for your time. Really insightful, very, very interesting to me, and no doubt to sort of our growing listeners. And enjoy the rest of your week. Great to have you on.
Will indeed. Thanks a million for that, Mike. Thanks for the opportunity.
Many thanks for listening. We welcome all feedback, so please get in touch with your suggestions on topics and future guests. Please don't forget to subscribe on your chosen platform so that you don't miss out.